77 WABC and Bergen Newbridge Medical Center honor the life of legendary broadcaster and our friend, Ernie Anastas.
Hi, it's Ernie Anastas. You know, your thoughts can affect how you feel. Bergen Newbridge Medical Center is the largest hospital in New Jersey, providing comprehensive, equitable, compassionate, and high-quality emergency inpatient and outpatient medical care, plus mental health services and substance use disorder treatment. The Bergen Newbridge team can address your total health needs in one convenient location. Call 201-225-7130 for an appointment or newbridgehealth.org.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Stone Zone. Tonight I thought we'd go straight from the shoulder politics and bring in what we used to call an old-time Democrat. This is more of a JFK, Harry Truman Democrat, a moderate Democrat who I think was very unfairly treated, but he came up the chairs. He was the assistant state's attorney for Cook County, Illinois. He served in the state legislature in 1996, was elected to the U.S. Congress, and then he became the first Democrat governor elected in Illinois in 26 years. I believe that he was railroaded to a long prison sentence, from which President Donald Trump ultimately gave him a full and unconditional pardon, for which I advocated and was paid nothing for those folks over at Reuters. But I'm proud to have my friend Rod Blagojevich with me because his story is a story of grit and redemption and faith. And all he was guilty of was politics. It outrages me to this day that he was convicted in a trial in which the principal evidence against him, wiretap conversations, were not allowed to be played in court. At the same time, he was denied Barack Obama's FBI 302, which you're supposed to have all evidence against you, but that's still sealed by the Department of Justice. I'm hopeful that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche will do something about that. I believe he will. And let's get to the bottom of this case. Let's bring the man on himself, Governor Rod Blagojevich. Governor, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Roger. Thanks for having me on. And I have to say that among the many great things that have happened to me since the new beginning I was given by President Trump when he commuted my sentence and then pardoned me, is I've gotten to know you. And, you know, I never knew you, of course, while I was, before I got out of prison. But there I was in prison watching you on television when they did to you what they did to me. And they went to your house with SWAT teams and arrested you early in the morning. And there you were, defiant and strong, and you did the Nixon thing. And it was love at first sight from my point of view for you, Roger, because as you know, I've long admired President Nixon.
Well, I mean, look, you are a fighter, and you are in a tradition of an old-time Democrat. You casually admit that you strongly supported President Trump's reelection. I mean, people don't really realize if the president at first commuted your sentence, which left you no longer had to, ending the 8 years incarceration, 8 hard years in prison, for refusing essentially an order by Barack Obama to replace Valerie Jarrett, who may or may not be a foreign asset, in the U.S. Senate. And that's the real crime that they sent you to prison for. I've studied this case extraordinarily, and that's why I think Obama's comments in this interview may be interesting to you. They're a little long, but let's roll them. We're waiting for an extraordinary situation in which Barack Obama, speaking to CBS, said that essentially the Department of Justice shouldn't be weaponized and the Attorney General should not act essentially as a hitman for the president, which is just, in my opinion, Governor, I know what you think, that has to be the greatest single hypocrisy in American history.
Yes, it is, and it's just another example of projection. In other words, Obama is projecting onto others what he himself does and what the people around him have done to the magnitude never before seen in American history. And the whole idea of weaponization and lawfare and undoing the will of the people by the abuse of the justice system and bringing criminal prosecutions against political rivals, which is what the Biden administration did to President Trump and which other Democrats did in other places like New York and Georgia, and Jack Smith and the case with the documents. All of this is part and parcel of the seeds that were planted by Obama. And I believe it started with my case. You know, the whole thing began, my issues, when Obama sent an emissary to me on election night, November 2008. I was a Democratic governor. I was the first Democratic governor to endorse Obama. I've known him since 1995. We came up together in Chicago politics. I have to say I was very good to him, did a lot of favors for him. And so he wanted to make a political deal. And we talked about what kind of deal we can make to criminalize it against me. I went to the big house for 8 years. Obama went to the White House for 8 years. And then, made a deal with those FBI agents and the prosecutors. And part of it, a lot of the truth is there in those FBI 302s, 13 pages of them. They talked to Obama, I think, the day after I was arrested. And to this day, those 302s, first of all, they were never given to my defense team, which I was entitled to, but they're redacted. Every word in those 13 pages is blacked out. And I think it's important for the American people to know what exactly he said to the FBI the day after I was arrested.
Just the chutzpah here. Can we tee up Obama at this point?
Well, there are a couple that I followed even though they weren't law. And I want us, we're going to have to do some work to return to this basic norm, and we probably now have to codify it. The White House shouldn't be able to direct the Attorney General to go around prosecuting whoever the President wants to prosecute.
Right, because technically it's under the executive branch.
Technically,
the norm is that it's independent.
The idea is that the Attorney General is the people's lawyer. It's not the President's consigliere.
Right, even when it's Bobby Kennedy.
It's Bobby Kennedy. And so two of the core principles of a democracy, we can survive a lot. Bad policy, funky elections, there's a bunch of stuff that we can overcome. We can't overcome the politicization of the criminal justice system, the awesome power of the state. You can't have a situation in which whoever's in charge of the government starts using that to go after their political enemies or reward their friends, right? So another power, maybe I'd say, would...
I mean, that's what we call chutzpah. Here is a guy who helmed a seditious conspiracy that began in the Oval Office with all the conspirators, including Sleepy Joe Biden and National Security Director Susan Rice, the CIA Director and Islamic convert John Brennan, the FBI Director James Comey, the acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and they planned to put in place what they admit, it was now proven in the documents released by Tulsi Gabbard. They began a seditious conspiracy in which they used evidence they knew was not legitimate, the so-called Seal dossier, and the claim that the Democrat National Committee had been the subject of an online hack, which is a total fiction, as the rationale to trigger a special prosecutor in order to bring Donald Trump down. And they knew it was fraudulent, and they got busted. That's who's lecturing you now about abuse of power. That's the greatest single dirty trick in American political history. These people actually planned to unseat a successor because the election didn't go their way. It was a coup d'etat, and they got caught. As far as presidents using attorney generals, President John Adams directed his attorney general to bring prosecutions, as did JFK, as did FDR, as did Abraham Lincoln. He's the chief executive country, but he's also the chief law enforcement officer, and he has constitutional jurisdiction as an executive branch department over the Department of Justice. Now, that's not to say it should be abused for political purposes, but look, I know, for example, that Richard Nixon lost to John Kennedy in 1960. In 1961 and 1962, he came up both years for a random federal tax audit. How likely do you think it is that was likely?
No, Roger, what you're saying is absolutely right. Look, I listen to Obama. It's maddening. I mean, that's breathtaking hypocrisy. And he's lucky that breathtaking hypocrisy is not a crime, because he'd get a life sentence. The amazing part of that is the chutzpah, you're right, that he would actually point at Trump when what they did to him, what they did to Trump, even before Trump was sworn in, that interregnum, that period after Trump beat Hillary in 2016 and was sworn in January, the 20th of January 2017, Obama and his people, Clapper, all those people were involved in conjuring up this fake Russian collusion thing. And that was an attempted coup d'etat. Now, that's a crime. And that's the sort of thing that the new president, the current president, has a responsibility and a duty to look into, because this is exactly the sort of thing that will destroy our freedoms. And so when Obama talks like that, it's almost like, he's pretending not to be Putin when it's the kind of stuff Putin would do.
I don't really understand where the progressive Democrats, who have clearly taken control of the machinery of the Democrat Party, the progressive/socialists, think that I don't see the appeal. I don't see their platform. I understand the argument they're making. We know they hate Trump. We understand that. We know that they aren't that patriotic. That they'd like to fundamentally change America. I think America's pretty damn great the way it is. If everybody obeyed the law, it'd be even better. Particularly if everybody obeyed the Constitution. But the arrogance of these people to think that voters are so stupid that we've forgotten that they spied on the President of the United States. We thought that we would forget that they abused the FISA courts. We think we would forget that they essentially fabricated evidence to frame a president, and then they weaponized with partisan Democrats. The four prosecutors, every prosecutor in my case had worked for Hillary Clinton. Every one of them had a motive. When my lawyers pointed out that the prosecutor in my case had represented Hillary Clinton herself and the Clinton Foundation in the famous fight over her emails, she should have been immediately fired, and the judge ruled that it was not a conflict, if you can believe such a thing. So that's who pursued. That was my pursuing. This woman had all the charm of a North Korean prison guard. Let me tell you.
So, look, Roger, we've both been on the wrong end of weaponization and lawfare. President Trump's been on the wrong end of that in an unprecedented way, what they did to him. And most of the American people saw through it. Half the country, of course, our country is so divided, and no matter how obvious certain things are, there are just some people, these Democrats and other people who hate Trump, are never going to allow themselves to try to objectively stay away from this. But this isn't a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. This is an American issue. This goes to the very heart of our freedoms in a country that's all about self-government, our right to choose our leaders in elections that are free and fair, and not have these unelected bureaucrats with fancy law degrees and uncontrolled power and unlimited resources have the ability to undo the will of the people by going after the elected president of the United States or the leading candidate from the other party, the opposition party, which is what happened to Trump the second time around. The first time was after he had won. They did this twice to Trump. And it would be wrong of President Trump, and I know he's going to do the right thing. He's already doing it, and his administration, a little bit late, but they're beginning to gin up and develop the momentum that's necessary to do what they have to do. If we're going to save our country and save our democracy, this isn't vengeance. This isn't the use of the Justice Department to go after your political enemies. This is holding those people who've done that accountable for having done that. They're the ones who are threatening our freedoms and our democracy. And if we don't stop it and make an example of them and bring them to account, we're going to lose our democracy. Because what's going to happen is one party does it, then the next party wins, they do it. And it's going to be an endless stream of this building up and getting worse and worse. And suddenly we're no longer the United States. We're Russia or China or Iran.
Extremely well put. I want to thank our guest, Governor Rod Blagojevich. Rod Blagojevich came up through the chairs of the Cook County machine, but he was also, as he told me many times, a great admirer of Richard Nixon. He actually met Richard Nixon. He's a Democrat governor who never raised taxes on the working class families of Illinois. It's an anomaly. J.B. Pritzker wanted to get to him today, but that's a big subject, if you know what I mean, and therefore we won't be able to kick it around. But unfortunately, another police officer has been killed in Pritzker's Illinois. It is really a tragedy. It really is a horrific tragedy. Thanks, Rod, for joining us.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it.
You're listening to the Stone Zone. When we get back, I think John Brennan may be in the hot seat. John Brennan is, of course, the CIA director, was one of the major orchestrators of the Russian collusion hoax. He slipped it into the footnotes of the president's intelligence briefing so that he could justify and rationalize FISA warrants in a special counsel that he knew was unwarranted based on false information, but based on information that had already been debunked. But we'll talk about that when we get right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, as I say, it's not a secret that the Justice Department shakeup is underway, and the Trump administration seems to be pushing forward with investigations into former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan is an interesting fellow. He was the guy who, as the Riyadh station chief, signed 4 of the visas for the men who attacked us, allegedly on 9/11. He also famously spied on a Senate committee that was investigating his use of illegal torture. He is one of the great masterminds of the Russian collusion hoax, taking the totally discredited Steele dossier and slipping it into the president's intelligence briefing to legitimize it and use it, as I say, for the basis of an extraordinary witch hunt. There were reports that he had received a subpoena from the Southern District of Florida. You see, the thinking here is this is a continuing conspiracy, a seditious conspiracy that began in the Oval Office in 2016, and actually in a meeting presided over by Obama himself. Joe Biden was there, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, CIA Director John O. Brennan, one of the most arrogant Trump haters on television. And a guy who admits to being a member of the Communist Party, admits to having voted for the Communist Party candidate. You have to ask yourself, how does such a person become the CIA director? It's through skullduggery. Would you be shocked to learn that he was one of the 51 who signed the claim that Hunter Biden's laptop had all the markings of Russian intelligence, which of course they knew it wasn't, that they made up? So I think it's all about to catch up with John O'Brien. There's some surprise that these subpoenas that Fox reported had been issued to Brennan had been withdrawn, and I was told that this had to do with the change of command in the investigation into Brennan. You now have veteran U.S. attorney, former U.S. attorney and bulldog lawyer Joe DiGenova, who was a very tough prosecutor in New York, joining the team to coordinate with the Justice Department. This appears to be a broader shift to focus on Brennan. Well, I think he's in deep, deep trouble. Great book, High Streets Treason, by my friend Ian Trottier. You can find that online, High Streets Treason. I'm Roger Stone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
As I said, I do focus on John O'Brien, a very interesting character who admits to being a communist, belonging to the Communist Party, admits voting for the Communist Party candidate in an election, who strangely signs visas for 4 of the hijackers to come to the United States and plot death against America. Who spies on a Senate committee, wiretapping, surveillance, also monitoring their computers of staff when they're investigating him for the illegal use of torture. And now has been caught literally in a new report by CIA Director Ratcliffe as having inserted quite cleverly the Steele dossier, discredited document paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. But he is a man who reportedly during his time in Riyadh converted to Wahhabism, the most radical Muslim. There are at least 2 FBI agents credibly have testified to that. I think it is quite possible. He's extraordinarily arrogant. I don't understand why these subpoenas were issued and then withdrawn. I'm told there is some coming legal technique that is different to get at this, but I don't want it to end up like the investigation of John Durham. Many people don't know this, but John Durham was never given subpoena power. So how could he investigate Russian collusion when he could just go to James Comey or John Brennan or Andrew McCabe or Rod Rosenstein and ask questions and be told to screw off because he had no authority to make them speak? That's beyond belief. So I came to the conclusion a long time ago that Bill Barr put the Durham investigation into place to buy time because he knew there was such unhappiness on the right. and that's why it has yielded. The two indictments were of clerks, and they got a slap on the wrist in the District of Columbia. The FBI director who changed documents, a fall guy for a much larger, was suspended from the bar, has his license back, has suffered no punishment, probably a hero on the left. Whereas the attacks on me, on General Flynn, on President Trump and his company, shows that these people cannot be trusted with power. And now Obama having the audacity to say that the Justice Department shouldn't be weaponized, but that is precisely what he did. There's two schools of thought about this. Some attribute this to Saul Alinsky, the famous communist agitator and operative who wrote a famous book, Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, in which he essentially says, always attack the other side for precisely what you are doing. Others ascribe that to Joseph Goebbels of Hitler's SS. But whether it doesn't matter which attribution you buy, I think that perfectly describes the situation here. It is amazing that Brennan was ever selected for this position. And now we get to see whether there will be accountability and justice. It is interesting that the counter of the attack of the left, mostly the New York Times, but all of them saying Trump is on a revenge tour and he's weaponizing the criminal justice system against his political opponents. In other words, doing precisely what they did for 4 years. I can tell you, I lived it. I had my civil liberties stripped from me. I was not allowed to speak. I was gagged unconstitutionally. I was never called before any grand jury. Then after I was indicted, I was criticized for not testifying for the grand jury, for which I'd never been called. They leaked for 2 years as a Chinese water torture that my arrest and my indictment was imminent, when my lawyers couldn't figure out any crime that I was guilty of. So it is those who have weaponized the system, and it doesn't end. The reason it ends in a place where I think we can get justice is because this conspiracy born in the White House, as I say, I believe in July of 2016, to blame the Russians if things go wrong or after things have gone wrong. Is the beginning of they're putting in place what they admit is the Clinton plan, which is to falsely claim that Trump was in bed with the Russians, for which there's no evidence, and that there was Russian interference in the elections. And they point to several ridiculous claims. When Comey, he charges 17, I believe it is, Russian intelligence agents with breaking into the DNC, essentially, and they never come to trial. There is no discovery with proof of that because it didn't happen. Then prosecutors claimed that my case was related to that case, and that they would produce evidence against me in my case that was gleaned from search warrants in this case, which they never did because none exists. They knew that the Russians never hacked the DNC. Of course, in my trial, I wanted to use expert testimony and forensic evidence to prove that there's far greater evidence that anything that was heisted from the Democrat National Committee, where there was much anger about the way they had changed the rules and twisted the rules to cheat Bernie Sanders, who had come out of nowhere to put up a very robust challenge to Hillary Clinton, which came to their surprise. I mean, the truth is, Bernie Sanders wasn't even a Democrat. He was still technically a socialist and kind of a cranky maverick who's been on the public payroll his entire life. Also an extraordinary hypocrite. You notice how Bernie Sanders used to criticize billionaires and millionaires. Now it's mostly focused on billionaires. That's because Bernie Sanders and his wife made millions of dollars in media placement fees from his two unsuccessful but extraordinarily well-funded presidential campaigns. Now, that's not illegal. I think there is maybe an ethical question of not informing your donors that you're getting 15% of the action, which adds to be millions of dollars. So Bernie's driving the top-of-the-line Mercedes. Bernie has three vacation homes. Bernie thinks that socialism is, in his case, for thee, but not for me, if you are him. One of the great hypocrites of all time. But that's his wing of the Democratic Party is ascendant. What's outrageous is the AOCs and the Sheila, what's her name, Ratib. I can barely say these foreign names. Ilhan Omar, who now appears to be above the law. She clearly lied on her immigration documents about being married to her brother to gain entrance to the country. That's illegal. But for some reason, the administration has not deported her. I think that's a deportable crime. She's also now suddenly extremely rich because she was tied into some of the Somalian scams that are going on in Minnesota. And those are now being detected in other states. Huge findings of fraud in and millions being stolen from federal health care funds in Ohio now. Add that to Michigan, Oregon, Washington, all places these abuses. Before it's all over, you'll find them in New York and California. It is very interesting that in the Florida race for governor, I think Byron Donalds, who's the clear front runner at this point, is with Donald Trump's endorsement, has running about 51% of the primary vote. In second place is Lieutenant Governor. No, in second place is a media phenomena named Fishback, who's a mook. I mean, literally Coke bottle glasses, the whole thing. It's really pathetic. And then the Lieutenant Governor, Jake Collins, whose campaign is run by the notorious John Cardildo, is actually coming in third. So the sitting Lieutenant Governor is coming in second to a mook. It's really quite extraordinary. The point, of course, is that Byron Donalds will run away with this, not only with the president's indictment, but an interesting new pledge to have a statewide DOGE effort go into every nook and cranny of Florida government to pull out waste, fraud, and corruption. One place he can start, by the way, is in the Broward County Sheriff's Office, where a piece I read this week told me that millions are missing from that particular budget. But I think that this is an idea that was popular at the end of, and one of the keys to electing Donald Trump. It was the most popular thing about Elon Musk's time in government, which I think he did this country an enormous service by identifying not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars of debt that could be caught. And the politicians have not followed through in cutting a tenth of it. And that needs to be done. We're being bled dry by these Somalians, bled dry in so many ways. AID, which was started by John F. Kennedy as a way to help small countries in this hemisphere struggling with communism, morphed into basically a sieve from which flowed all these monies to NGOs and other politically motivated efforts to undermine America, or actually to be used for political purposes to undermine American candidates and leaders. So we were fighting our own tax money. This is a cornucopia of fraud, and I think quite unconstitutional, because a person cannot be compelled to advocate a position which he does not agree under the Constitution. What is happening in the country is really extraordinary. Donald Trump clearly trying to end the war now as quickly as he can. We have seen a drop in gas prices going back to the national trend. The underpinnings are there, in my view, in the big, beautiful bill. The economic progress of the country was interrupted by the war, which our leaders tell us was necessary because they were closer to building a bomb. They boasted about it themselves. On this, I would not want to take a chance, because these mullahs are not like the Japanese or the Germans, who would like to kill us but would like to survive. These people are ready to die, and they're promised 17 Vestal virgins if they die a martyr for this cause. And they're bloodthirsty murderers. They've murdered Americans all the way back to the GI base in Kuwait, the first world tower, first Twin Towers bombing. There's a long history of attacks on Americans by these people, but it's not just that. It was the way they were treating their own people, actually literally executing their own citizens in the streets because they were hungry and they could no longer put up with the political and economic failure that is Iran. So it's been an extraordinary week. I watched these videos, I think it was on the Times of London, of these brave Iranian patriots singing a patriotic song just before you watch them being hung. These were the most shocking videos I have ever seen. So it does show an uncommon courage. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Stone Zone. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I saw the Vice President this week. He is a very hard-driving, conservative, principled man who loves his country. He's doing a great job in a job where you don't get a lot of credit, you don't get a lot of kudos. It's just, that's the way it is. But he's extraordinarily effective behind the scenes, and effective as he fights to make America great again. The Trump administration's released a new trove, evidently, of unseen government files. These are UFO-related documents, in this case called Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, or UAPs. This is all part of the president's push to bring long-hidden information into the public view. I've spoken at great length about the fact that one of Jackie Gleason's wives insisted to me in an interview for my book that her husband, who was the great one, the Miami Beach comedian and a great supporter and friend of Richard Nixon, who wintered in Key Biscayne nearby, were great golfing partners and both liked a cocktail. And on one occasion, the president and Jackie had a few too many belts. Jackie's house can still be seen along the golf course there in Miami Beach. He did his show from Miami Beach. It was called the Jackie Gleason Show. He always identified Miami as the fun and sun capital of the world. He actually made a historic endorsement video for his buddy Nixon. He once told me he was extraordinarily well dressed, even for a man who was sometimes on the corpulent side. He told me he had every suit made in 3 sizes: fat, fatter, and fattest. He also had impressive taste in music, and he was a megastar of the day. But he and Nixon got loaded, and it is believed, as told to me by Gleason's wife, when Gleason started asking Nixon about whether there were flying saucers and aliens from foreign space, Nixon took them to a secret government facility that was in Homestead, Florida, where Jackie saw things that blew his mind, including remnants of foreign life, of alien life, pieces of crafts, and so on. It is all recorded in my book. Now, he and Nixon were no doubt loaded when this happened, but it is pretty widely believed that there's a lot the government is not telling us. Pardon me, however, if I notice that these things get discussed at any time they wish to distract attention from everything else going on. And therefore you have to wonder what this is, whether this is a distraction. I'm for disclosures. In this case, the files are being housed at the war.gov/UFO under President Trump's unsealing reporting system for such encounters, an initiative known as Pursue. That involves the White House, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Energy, NASA, the FBI, and the Pentagon's all-domain Anomaly Resolution Office and other intelligence agencies. You see, when Trump ordered the release of all the documents that were in the National Archives, or all the documents pertaining to JFK's murder being declassified, he specifically said those documents in the National Archives. But the problem was CIA, the FBI, the IRS, and many other naval intelligence had withheld documents and kept them within their own departments, and therefore were never given to the hard-charging Anna Paulina Luna, the chairman of the subcommittee chairman in charge of getting at these secrets. She has been dogged, has gotten the CIA to admit that they had knowledge of Oswald long before they admitted it, that Oswald in fact had a handler. She has, I think, documented one aspect of this, the Central Intelligence Agency's lack of the truth, and she's also documented the attempts to blame it on the Russians, and she's asked legitimate questions that there have been no answers for. NBC has tapes of videos that would really enlighten whether or not for a certainty Lee Harvey Oswald is indeed the killer. There's many reasons why I doubt that he is, but those tapes have not been turned over to Chairwoman Luna, who has sought them, for example. Also, the Kennedy families never released interviews that Bobby Kennedy and Ethel Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy did with James Manchester. Manchester was a writer at the time. And those are sealed for another 20 years, but I think they give us great insights into who really killed John F. Kennedy. To me, that is the beginning of the shift of power into the hands of what Dwight Eisenhower tried to warn us about, the military-industrial complex. Today we call it the deep state, but it's the same thing. It is a network of unelected bureaucrats, elites, and others who pull the strings behind the scenes and probably have since that coup of 1963. And when presidents get in their way, John F. Kennedy, who they murdered, Richard Nixon, who they murdered politically, they tried to kill Ronald Reagan but failed. They've tried 3 times to kill Donald Trump, but they failed. These are very, very deep, dangerous people, and unfortunately they're burned very deep into the fabric of our government, particularly our judiciary. People don't understand how difficult the job of acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is. A magistrate judge is appointed by Democrats, refusing the most cursory of requests regarding warrants. Up and down the line, he's fighting a bureaucracy that has been put in place. So those who say that justice has not come fast enough, he brought this I think brilliant and worthy indictment of Joe Biden, of Barack Obama. What am I saying? Against James Comey for his seashell ornament saying 8947. That is very clearly a threat against a sitting president, and for the idea that James Comey, as the former U.S. attorney, as a former chief law enforcement officer, as the head of the FBI, didn't know that 89ing someone means to have them whacked, eliminate them, kill them. So Blanche has now laudably brought that prosecution, and I think you're going to see a lot more from the acting attorney general. Roger Stone, thanks for joining us on the Stone Zone.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here? Oh, it's out of here! Home run Ferry Hawks!
Get ready, Staten Island. It's time to celebrate 5 years of Ferry Hawks baseball. Come out to the ballpark this week as the Ferry Hawks welcome in the Charleston Dirty Birds May 5th through the 10th. Grab the kids and come on out. We kick it off on Tuesday, May 5th with Cinco de Baseball with $5 tickets and $5 food and beverage specials. And we end the week as we celebrate all moms on Mother's Day. Moms get in free. Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.